Today, I have a very special guest for you, Katie Morton. Katie is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a best-selling author, and one of the leading voices in mental health education online. Through her books and global community, she takes the complexity out of topics like trauma, family dynamics, and the patterns that keep us stuck. In this episode, we dive into the war of words and why shifting from being triggered to emotionally activated helps reclaim your sense of agency. We discuss the impact of social media on our nervous systems and how to move from a reactive emotion mind to a more grounded, wise mind. We also explore the power of the pause, how to reconnect with the body's intuition and build deeper connections through uncomfortable conversations. Katie Morton, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you.
I'm excited to chat with you as well. One of the things that caught my eye about your content, and it's one of the things that I try to do in my own content, is be able to take really complicated topics and subjects and make it easy to understand, to distill it down just a little bit further, and then maybe provide, real life examples that people can actually connect with, and then take that common language and put it over their experience.
Love it. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for doing that. I think a lot of people find themselves in this place with therapy speak and using that language and almost weaponizing it at times against themselves and with other people. And there's a lot of misunderstanding because so many people are making mental health content and not everybody's doing their due diligence to read some case studies or read the books behind me or have some deeper conversations with the people in their lives, or even on the internet, as we were saying, with the comment section, as they like to chime in and, destroy you as a person without actually saying, you know what, I kind of want to create a relationship here. Is there a better question that I could ask?
Yes. It's interesting, especially with comments. I always think is this a bid for attention, like connection? Yeah, people do that a lot. If you've read research, I'm sure you have, it looks like you have behind you too, is any research you do on connection, people do these little bids for it in all different sorts of ways. So it can be everything from me walking by my husband and touching him on the shoulder to someone on the internet leaving what we would think is a troll comment, but it's their way of being see me, hear me, connect with me, but I don't know how else to do it. It's almost like the kid in school who is, always causing trouble for the teacher, but it's more because they just want to be seen.
It is. So exact example today, somebody was very triggered in the comment section. I hate that word, by the way.
Same.
And if you use that word in front of law enforcement or military members, they're going to look at you and be like, I've never been triggered in my life. That is not something So I started from a relational intelligence standpoint, started looking at it with a new lens and calling it emotional activation. And I've tested this out in other areas, in different comment sections, and people are like, you know what? I really like that. It feels freeing. It feels temporary. And it's yeah, that's kind of the point.
Because that's what it is. Yes. Love that. Language is everything.
And so
I feel go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. When we look at language, what does that look like for you and your clients and then the people in your own comment section, and how do you guide them through that?
I think to your point, just what we call something means a lot, especially now we're kind of in the war of words. People will be really mad if you use this word and you say this way. And that can, when we are, emotionally activated or triggered or whatever you want to call it, the way that I always consider that is, instead of being able to then think in wise mind, I can make good decisions, I can choose to respond how I want, I am in emotion mind. I'm reactive. I'm lashing out. I'm acting without thinking a lot of times. And so and also you're shut down. That's not a place where I can learn something. That's not a place I can listen. And so I guess in general, when it comes to language, I try to be as inclusive as possible while also being as accurate as possible, which is sometimes a tricky line to walk. I know that might seem shocking to some people, but if you water something down so much, it can lose its actual factual or research-based backing. I can't, start calling something that it's not. And I know it's very abstract, but if you think about it, even just talking about triggered, emotional activation is very on point. That's directly correlated. That's exactly what's happening. That's still supported. But if I was to call, triggered upset, that's not the same thing. Doesn't actually capture what it is. And so I think language is really important. I think I try to do my best with it, but I also, and my audience knows this, I challenge them all the time to own their side of the street. That if you're triggered, it's a you problem. That's not the other person's problem, because you can't control other people. They can do their best to be kind, but you could still have an emotional activation.
So how do we get people, because this is always the thing, we have to get people to do things, right? To claim their side of the street and start working on that.
I think a lot of it has to do with conversations. And I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, ugh. We have to be able to have uncomfortable conversations. We have to be able to speak up, tell people what we want and need. And all of that's really easy to say. It's really hard to do, right? I think for a lot of us to have a conversation with someone we disagree with, especially now, people just aren't doing it. They don't want to. They automatically have preconceived beliefs about this person just because they don't agree with them. And they haven't taken any opportunities to sit down and chat and to find out if that's actually true or not, to what we would, we'd call it like testing your hypothesis, right? People jump right to conclusions. And so I think the best way for us to build bridges, for us to improve our relationships is through tricky conversations. Like I'm not any different from anybody else. Like I have a hard time asking for what I want sometimes, and I have an even harder time receiving it, letting people help me, because I'm like this hyper independent, like I can do it myself. Even as a little kid, I was that way. I'm like, I don't need your help. I was very much that way. I can dress
Get
myself.
away from me.
Exactly.
Don't touch me.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us are that way. And I really feel like we need to lean into the discomfort of conversations about things that maybe I don't know, we don't even know why we believe it, or we have never thought about asking that question. And I don't know, I feel like it's through those difficult conversations that we'll come around to new information, maybe a realization, oh my God, I never thought about it that way. Wow. We need to be challenged. I feel like we need to be critical thinkers, not just drones.
I like what you mentioned there about expanding your capacity. Talk about this a lot with discomfort and uncertainty. We're creating a new relationship with those things. But then when we're having conversations with other people, you're so right in that why do we find ourselves just cutting people off and saying, nope, I already know who you are. I know what you're doing. I know what to expect from you. And that's never going to change. That's always who you're going to be. What they don't realize, I think, is that that's actually the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're pushing people away and keeping them at arm's length. Even though you claim you're an empath and you're anxious attachment, you're actually avoidant in that process and causing your own isolation. And that gets really frustrating for the individual, because now they just see the world as, happening to them, and I don't have any choice or agency in anything. And how do I reclaim that? Well, I have to get it through you, but I've already determined that I don't trust you and I don't like you. Not really.
Sorry, I have a leaf blower outside. Do you
I
hear
can
that?
hear it. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's across the street, but it's still okay. He's gone away.
I'm wondering if the noise canceling will take care of it. I'm hoping
Okay,
so.
I just never know. I'm like, if we do room tone, but because they kind of walk close and not. But I love what you were saying there. Sorry, just refresh my memory about the shutting down. Like you can't.
Yeah, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where you end up isolating yourself in that process because you're pushing people away, not realizing that's what you're doing.
Yes, I love talking about this because I think for most people, they, like you said, they think they're empaths, they think they're open-minded, they feel like this is just something that they can do, and that I can have conversations with anybody. However, the truth about it is that they only can have conversations in echo chambers, in little bubbles. To be challenged, I think, feels too risky for them. I feel like for a lot of people, when you're asked to question beliefs you've maybe had your whole life, that makes you feel really maybe scared. And people might not like that word. They're like, I'm not scared. No, it shakes your foundation a little bit. And maybe in order for you to actually hear them, you'd have to consider whether or not this thing you've believed your whole life is true. And if that's like a lot of your relationships are predicated on it, especially now, I feel like people find their tribes and they like stick with them. And so if I don't agree with them, then I'm ostracized. And that's very dangerous to us emotionally. You think of where we came from as like caveman, us being in community made sure that we could survive, right? If I was on my own, it's less likely that I would have survived that time period. And so it's kind of in our DNA, in our nervous system, that we want to be connected with others. We want to have community. We want to be part of a group. And so I think for people who have certain belief systems, it's almost easier and safer for them to just shut people down and to just name call and feel like you can't exist. You can't have these other beliefs. I can't even hear I don't even want to hear, because that would mean that then my whole belief system about myself and my reality might be incorrect, or I might need to rethink it. And, if we just take a beat, we can realize that could feel really scary.
Yeah. When do you think we became so isolated into these silos or groups? I feel like being a Gen Xer, the way that I grew up was very different. There was a lot of freedom and autonomy to just like roam and experience things. And maybe you weren't always being watched, but somehow or another, you always made it back home before the lights came on, the street lights. You were able to build and cultivate a certain level of resilience. Now, emotionally, there may have been some other things that are missing, because I love when people chime in with, well, I'm Gen X and I'm a millennial and I'm Gen Z. And it's like, they all somehow collectively, grew up in the same household with the same experience and the same language and the same words. And so we're all saying the same thing generationally across the board. And we have these sweeping generalizations. And it's just like, but some of it is true just because of the way that we grew up. We did have more freedom, or at least it felt that way.
100%. I'm an elder millennial. I'm right on the cusp of Gen X.
I'm a zennial. I'm like,
yeah,
right
you're
there.
right. Exactly. And I think we do make those sweeping generalizations. I believe in this. Again, I'm making a big assumption too, a big sweeping generalization. I blame it on social media. And I know that might shock a lot of people. They might be like, but you can't blame everything on that. I'm not blaming everything. There's a lot that's changed. Obviously, in any kind of study of things like this, there's too many variables to consider them all. But I believe that social media is what has shifted the most, especially when we're talking about being siloed or getting kind of caught in a little bubble of the same thoughts, same people. Because if you think about it, like, I'll just give you a random example. when I'm on TikTok in particular, I was looking for new recipes, okay? And so I only trust people who, tell me on TikTok. I think it's always like something sponsored. So look for ones that aren't sponsored, look at the recipes. And I was looking at, I had ground pork, so I had to figure out what I wanted to make with ground pork. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I looked that up one day. For weeks, I keep seeing ground pork recipes over and over and over. And you might be like, well, that's fine, whatever, who cares? But if I was looking for content that supported one belief, then I'm only going to get fed that. And then my experience, my belief about my environment is that all these other people agree with me. Right? It's like confirmation bias. It's essentially sending all these messages telling me, hey, your world and environment support exactly what you think. So that means everybody else is like, they're not using their brain. Something's wrong. They're incorrect. And so we get this kind of false positive, or this false sense of confirmation that exactly how we think is what the world thinks. And so when we find a little outlier, we're like, nip that at the bud. That's not correct. Versus what we used to get, like you said, we free to roam. I mean, I grew up also in the country, so we'd roam. Like my dad would whistle, and I could hear that from acres away, and I'd be like, I got to get home quick, because I'm almost out of my bounds, and he's gonna be mad if I'm not home in 10 minutes. So got to get going. But I would, because of that, I would be hanging out with whatever friends were close by, or so and so's cousins were in town, and you just chitty chat with people. There was never any, I'm only getting this one type of content. I'm only hearing from this one version of a person. Instead, you hear from all sorts. I mean, even within my family, I have vastly different, we always joke, we have the redneck part of my family, and they would know that I say that with love.
Yes.
They're very country. They're very backwoods.
There's no judgment.
Nope. And some of them are kind of off grid, they're just kind of a little different that way. But that's still my family, and they have different beliefs about things than I do. I've turned into kind of a city girl. Don't tell them, but they kind of know. And, and then there's just different pieces. Then some members of my family decide to go on to get higher education later in life. And so there's just all these different avenues of people, even within my experience, sans the internet, where I get to see different walks of life, different choices, different thought processes. And I get to then critically think and decide, based on all this, what do I think? What's best for me? Or what conclusions can I draw from this? And I feel like nowadays, because it's just shipped out to us every few seconds, you can swipe, and you get the same thing. We unfortunately aren't challenged, and we don't see variety.
I talk about this often with, seeing the same thing over and over again. With the rise of the influencer therapist, they too fall prey, and admit it. It's okay to admit it. I'm not judging you. We all do this at certain times, but you find a particular topic that works for a period of time, and it happens to be hot. So every video that you make, or 3 out of every 5 videos you're making, is on that particular topic. And what do you think that does to the person that is trying to, one, learn more about that topic, but also they want to grow, they want to change, they want to evolve, they want to expand, they want to figure things out for themselves. Maybe they don't have access to therapy or coaching, and social media is their way to connect with people who are professionals, and they're looking for some integrity as well as ethics in the type of content that's being pushed out to them by particular individuals so that they can say, okay, how can I use this in my real life? The problem that ends up happening is now they're receiving that same thing over and over again, and it's literally wiring them to think a particular way, and they're always in a state of activation, right? Because we're not giving them the aspirin. You're not really getting the solution. You're getting 3 tips for this and 5 tips for that, and how to find out if they're a narcissist. And so you're constantly consuming that, and what you consume over a long period of time just becomes you if you're not creating separation in that.
100%. And it's funny you said narcissism, because that's exactly what my brain went to. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
everybody's a narcissist.
Or dismissive avoidant.
Yep. Anxious attachment. Like there's all these things. And I think it's the tricky part about social media, right? Because there is a positive to it. Like we're educating and more people are aware of what attachment is, or are you avoidant? Are you anxious? However, not every psychological, and I'm sure you know this very well, not every psychological theory or tool or tip can be condensed into 40 seconds. And the number of times I will hear from like my editor where they're like, well, this is a little long. Can you like tighten this? And I'm like, tighten this? Well, it's already only 2 minutes. Like, ugh, I don't know. What do you cut out from there? And I feel like when you cut things out and you try to make something that is clickable and interesting, right? There's so many factors. Sometimes you can lose the real meat, the real importance, the real message. And I also think that, and this again, pluses and minuses, this isn't all or nothing. Life is all gray, but there's a lot of people who aren't credentialed, don't have licenses, trying to spout, what helped them and their best tools. And while that can be helpful for some people, if someone's going searching for real content, real support, like you said, they don't have other resources, I do fear that sometimes they'll go to them, they'll try that one thing that worked for that other person, and then they'll be like, well, shit, this doesn't work for me. Now therapy doesn't work, or this isn't, and they might make these, I don't know, broader stroke assumptions about self-improvement and therapy as a whole, when I'm just at least hoping that they'll consider what they've viewed the source, and that it was just one thing, and that they'll try again.
Yeah, I always try to make it very clear to people. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a clinician. That's not where this comes from for me. But I am somebody that believes in self-education, that you can read a ton of books behind you, extract the information, and then deploy that in real time in your life. Now, discernment is a huge part of this. Like, you have to have the ability to actually watch a video, read the caption. I know it's hard, guys, but you got to read the caption, because there's going to be additional stuff in there for you that's going to be valuable beyond the 2 minutes. The other side of this is, in 2026, I've shifted to just making the content I want to make. So I don't care if it's clickable. If it's 5 minutes long, then it's 5 minutes long, and that's how it is. And I post it, and Instagram is like beating me down for it. They're like, we're not suggesting your content anymore. I'm like, that's fine. I would rather be in integrity with the content, and for the people that do see it, they get the full value from it, than try to, hijack somebody's nervous system through the content. I can't stand that.
No, and I think it's also caused, and I even feel this personally, that like we're more reactive in general these days because we're so queued up. I mean, I don't think we're supposed to be exposed to as much content as we are. And it's funny, recently, I mean, not funny, haha, just like every year I don't really believe in like New Year's resolutions in the traditional sense, but I do believe in like a looking back on the year and like, what are the things I'm proud of, and what are the things that I'd like to do more of or less of or whatever. And one of the things that I have wanted to shift is the amount of content I consume, because I just don't think it's good for me. I don't feel good after. I even tell my husband sometimes, he'll share something like, that's just rage bait. I don't need to be baited. I don't really care. I'm pretty sure they're not that stupid. Like I don't want to get pulled in. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more mindful. It's hard, which, dopamine is quite a driver of behavior, no matter how cheap or shitty it is. And so we keep going back to social media looking for more. But I've been really intentional, and I can tell you, even in the first few weeks of trying to do this, I do feel better. I do feel less anxious. I fall asleep more quickly. And so that's all proof positive that yes, we don't need to get our nervous system hijacked. We should all pull away from content that does that, because it's the leaning into that type of content that causes creators to make more of it. It's like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because you end up shifting into a place of comparison. Well, what is this person doing and why did that video go viral? Mine should have gone viral because it's equally as good and informational.
Yeah.
My stuff is co-regulating, their stuff is aggravating, and you find yourself in this place of then you're not creating authentically for who you are and how you want to present yourself. You start doing it for all the wrong reasons. And I think people can feel that. The other thing was
100%.
I started on Substack recently, and I didn't really see myself being a Substack creator. It just wasn't something that I do. I felt like the podcast, that's kind of its thing. Social media, that's the other thing. I'm good with getting some viral videos here and there. But when I started putting stuff on Substack, you get a whole new audience. They have a little bit more space to sit and read, and a lot of what they comment is really thoughtful and from their own perspective. And it's really great and refreshing to see that. Are you on Substack?
I am as a reader, not as a creator.
Okay.
That's also something, I guess it was probably November of 2025, I started reading more Substack for the main reason, kind of like what I was talking about, like not wanting my nervous system to be hijacked, because reading something isn't the same as, I don't know, I'd have to look into research about this because I don't have the answer of why, but reading about someone's experience or someone's thoughts is not as dysregulating as watching a video. It's not as dopamine driving. It's a slower burn. And I read a lot of books in general. I always have, but I fell off for a little while. And in the past 3 or 4 years, I've tried reading more. I toggle between what I call a workbook, which is like something about like a psychological trick or tool, to like fun. Like I love crime. So it'd be like a crime book.
Of course you do.
I know, can't help myself.
I'm
a therapist. I'm a female in a certain age. I feel like all of my friends and I all love crime of all sorts. And
Do you have a book club?
I did. I don't right now, but I did for a long time. And it kind of got me back into reading, actually. And so anyway, I say all that to say that like reading is a slower dopamine hit. It's not an immediate gratification. And I feel like that immediate gratification or immediate response isn't always a good one, right? That's where we feel hijacked. Like I'm giving my control over to an algorithm, to a creator. And I want to take it back. And reading is just very different. Substack creates a very different vibe. It's like, even the way that I engage with that type of content is different. It's more of a sit down, lean back, take it in. I take my time. It's not like just swiping and reacting.
It's interesting because I tend to, I'm actually posting there and I have a lot of stream of consciousness, but I'm far more open with what I'm putting out in stream of consciousness than I am with like on my Facebook page or something like that, because I recognize like if I put this on Facebook, I'm going to get annihilated.
People are more reactive. Substack is not reactive. Substack, like you said, is more thoughtful. Someone can disagree, but they're more thoughtful with their words. I feel like it's just a much less reactive space for now. Knock on wood that we haven't,
I can see it shifting, but yeah.
Yeah, and more people join. I mean, that's kind of the tricky thing, right? But it seems less reactive. It seems more thoughtful, and it also seems open to other views so that we can all be critical thinkers. There's a Substack I follow. I think it's like Thinking More Clearly, or How to Become a Thinker. It's by this guy. His last name is Irvine. Anyway, I'll have to pull it up. But I follow it, and it's all about this. Like, I got interested in it because I read this book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, and it essentially, have you read it? Oh, okay. It's 100 different ways that we have biases in our brain, and the fact that we don't think clearly, even when we think we are. Like the choices that we make and the people that we like and don't like and the things we trust and don't trust all come from these certain biases that we have. And I mean, you read the book and you're like, wow, no one thinks clearly, but it at least brings an awareness to the fact that like, hey, I need to check in with myself. If I'm making a big decision, I need to at least consider, am I giving this more weight because of my background when I shouldn't be, or, something like that.
One of the most powerful tools you can use, and you just said it, is the self-check-in. It's the power of the pause, the ability to step back, zoom out, open up your field of vision, take your time and opportunity to assess like where you are, what's happening, what's in your environment, who are you talking to, what words are being used, what are you feeling? You do a body scan, what's happening in my body? And this is all happening in split seconds. This isn't like a 5-minute thing. But man, it's amazing just how your thought process changes and then how you view other people in that process as well.
100%. Because I love the pausing and the tapping in, especially to your body, because one thing, and this sounds silly that I've learned it later in life, but my 20s are just like complete chaos, I feel like, in a lot of ways. So yeah, right. I'm like, and 30, you're like, I'm kind of, I don't know who I am, right? I was figuring it
Yeah.
out, and everybody has.
Finally living in my 40s.
I know. Now I kind of know who I am a little bit more, 100%. But the tapping into your body, because your body tells you way more information than often your logic brain is able to process, or at least able to acknowledge. Your body's taking it all in and telling you. Like, I'll never forget, my husband will periodically, we'll meet new people in general, and we meet a lot of new people, but like, no, someone that's like wanting to be new to our friend group, and I'll feel some kind of way about them. A lot of times I'm like, oh, I really like them, they're really cool. And then other times I've been like, I don't. And he'll be like, what? And I'm like, I'm not hanging out with this. I don't trust this person. And then inevitably, unfortunately, something will happen. Like, they will do something, we'll find out they're lying, or they swindled this person, or they said this thing. And it was my body that told me, it wasn't my brain. They hadn't done anything. Like, I couldn't pinpoint this action or this thing. It was just like, I just got a bad vibe. And I was like, And like my stomach, I just did not feel comfortable with them. And it's like all my spidey sense, you're like, ooh, like the hairs on your back, and you're like, I don't. And that's a huge resource to us, and we should utilize it. But instead we like cut it off, and we shame it, and we're like, I can't believe, like we try to numb it out. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to know. Why you got to make me so nervous? Why you got to make this uncomfortable? When our body's like, hey, use me. I'm telling you, something's going on. And so I do love that check-in. I feel like, honestly, all of us, before responding or reacting to anyone, just do yourself a favor, give yourself 5 seconds, do a quick rundown of how you're thinking and feeling, and then decide to proceed forward. I think that would save a lot of chaos that we see in our world right now.
It would, and it would stop people from making the statement, they fooled me, they duped me. And it's like, yes, those things can happen, but more often than not, there were other signs and signals prior, before you really had any type of other connection with this person, that you felt, that you knew, that you observed, but you ignored it because somehow or another, maybe it made you feel bad, or there was something shameful there for you, or there was some other experience that was stopping you from trusting that gut feeling, or the intuition, or that spidey sense, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, and there can be a lot of reasons that we don't trust that spidey sense, right? I mean, my brain automatically goes to like trauma. I have a lot of members of my community who've suffered trauma in their life, and we all lived through COVID, so we've all been traumatized. I'm sorry to tell you. It was a crazy time. But, it's like nobody
We'll
wants to
talk about that next.
Yeah. I'm like, nobody wants to talk about it because it was a trauma. So when we have trauma in our past, what that usually means, especially if we're young when it happens, is that our gut was telling us one thing and someone was doing another and telling us our gut was wrong, right? Like, if this person, let's say, was hitting us or sexually abusing us in some way, our gut was like, this person isn't safe, I don't like them. But then maybe they were like, no, but I love you. This is, it's like a weird, that doesn't make sense, right? Those two things shouldn't go together. I shouldn't be hurt by someone who loves me, but I am. And so we grow up, or we go through this period of time in our life where our gut and our internal reaction is negated, is overrid by somebody else's decisions. And we start to think like, maybe I'm wrong. Right? Those shame thoughts come in. Maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe my gut is off. And I hear that from my audience all the time. Like, I don't even know if I can trust my gut. And I think, that makes sense, because we have to give ourselves a little compassion. Like, hey, like, bad things happened and your body doesn't know. It's still telling you the signals, but you didn't know to listen. And so for some people, that tapping in can take some time. And I just want everybody to know that if you're doing this for the first time in a long time, it's very normal and okay to be like, I'm not sure. But I encourage you to just, at the very least, if you can't lean into it and make a decision, at least journal about that experience. Like, hey, this is and these are my thoughts about it. Because I think that's one of the pieces that people often don't, especially, people like myself, who I can trust my gut and I feel it. Like I said, people, I'll be like, and then I don't want to be friends with them. Not everyone can do that right up front, but your body is still sending a signal. It still is telling you. We just have to, it's almost like this maybe is my age, but you have to like tune into the radio, and you're turning the dial along. It's still sending that signal. Whether or not you're tuned into it, the signal's still being sent. So it's almost like we're hearing it. It's like, and you're so close to it. You have to just lean in a little, and then you'll hear it more clearly. But I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes we turn back away. It's like, oh, that's too uncomfortable. Or, oh, I don't know if I can trust that, my gut has never been right because of the historical experiences. So I feel like that's always an important piece to mention too, because it is great to tap in. I just want everybody to know that sometimes when you do that, it's not as easy as maybe I'm making it sound.
Well, that's always the first thing that people say, right? Easier said than done. And it's like,
Always.
yeah, Always.
That's life. Yeah.
That is like, you are 100% correct. The other part of this, and something that I realized for myself, is that intentional isolation becomes solitude when you've had some adverse experiences in your life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want people to know that it's okay to take that time period, whatever that time period is for you. You should have an upper limit. Just saying, we do want to connect with society and be a part of it and be a contributing member. At the same time, there was so much growth that happened in that experience for me, and allowing myself to tap into my yeses and my nos. And that was something that I always struggled with, because it was always yes. I didn't have a no. And then as you step into this place of trusting yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you're creating the habits, the practices, and the rituals in your life that support you in the life that you're leading, and where you want to go and who you want to become, because we're always in a state of becoming, but who you become is up to you. You find yourself in that place. And so like now I'm in this place where it's like, oh no, I'm very clear on my yeses and my nos, and I do it with compassion.
Mm-hmm.
The no is always with compassion, unless you force me into a corner, and it's a different story. But being able to have that authority within yourself and to know yourself to that level is such a gift, not only to yourself, but to the people in your life as well.
100%. And I love that you talked about like it being intentional, because I think for some people they're afraid to be alone, or they hide away in it. So it's not really intentional. It's almost like it's done out of fear, or it's done out of like, I guess it'd still be fear, but I think like protection, because I'll hear from a lot of my audience it's like safer to be alone. But there is some power in spending time with yourself. Like I'm always talking about the fact that like when we try to get to know somebody, what do? We spend time with them. And so I'm like, why don't we spend time with ourselves? How are you supposed to get to know yourself? Because like you said, you're always in this stage of becoming. Katie today is different from last year. Hell, she's different from yesterday. Every day I'm growing and changing, thank God. And so what a beautiful opportunity to get to know me and to get to decide who I want to become and what steps am I making. I think we often look out into the future and we're like, oh my God, that's so far away. I could never do that. That's going to take years. Like if I make this choice, if I want to go back to school, if I want to leave this relationship, oh, that's a huge thing. But life is honestly not made by huge choices and big decisions. It's all those tiny little steps. So it's like, hey, today, maybe I am intentional. I spend a little time with myself. I check in with how I feel. What signals is my body sending? What choices am I making that I like? Or what's something I did that maybe I'd like to do a little different? All that can be so powerful, because we need to get to know ourselves. Like, I think unfortunately a lot of us don't, and we don't spend any time. And I used to, one of my favorite things, and I say used to just because I haven't gotten back into it since COVID and we moved, but I used to go to the bar, like sit at a bar at a restaurant all the time by myself, like take myself on a date. I date myself
Mm-hmm.
and just hang
That's
out.
good.
And I didn't back then too. I mean, this is also just, I guess, the era, like cell phone. I didn't bring my phone, like I just put it in my purse. I didn't have it out. Like it just wasn't the same as it is now. I'd chitty chat with the bartender, maybe talk with somebody there, but it wasn't really about that. It was just about spending time with myself. And I feel like we need to get back in that habit. It's incredibly healthy and helpful to be able to sit with yourself and become friends with who you are.
I always borrow from all the sales language that's out in the world. Well, they have to learn to know, like, and trust you. Well, you have to do those things for yourself too. And if you can't, you're going to find yourself in this place of struggle and suffering and not having the types of connection that you desire, and, sitting in a place of resentment and contempt because you're not really getting what you need to survive.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, we're so disconnected from self. We're so always looking out, like the number of people I've heard from that are like, looking for outside validation. Like they need someone else to tell them. And it's not that we can't go seeking wise counsel. Like there's nothing wrong with talking to someone that you trust, or a therapist or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just like, we also need to be able to tap in and see what's true for us. And yeah, I love that the sales tying it, because it is, you have to be able, like you need to do that for yourself. I think we put a lot of emphasis. There's videos all over the internet about, dating relationships, but what about the relationship with yourself? Like, that's the most important one that you have. It's the foundation from which all your other relationships can even exist. And going back to what you said about not being able to say no, like it was always yes. I also am that person, or was. I'm in recovery. My name is Katie and I'm a recovering people pleaser. But even learning that about myself took some honest time with myself, like realizing like what I was doing, why I was doing it. It really opened the door for me to even consider change. So often we just abandon ourselves for other people. There's this quote that it's not mine, but it's just been floating on the internet forever, is like lighting yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm. We do that all the time. I'm going to say yes because I think it's going to make you happy. Is it going to make me happy? No, but I'm going to do it, and then either I'll be resentful or I can play the martyr, like, oh, woe is me, I did so much. But you're like, I wrote this in my most recent book. It's like I tied myself up and then complained about how tight the ropes were that I used. And it's like, what? Like, you're doing this to yourself. And I think a lot of our things in life are like that, where it's like the behaviors that we're deciding to make, we aren't being intentional because we don't spend any time in quiet with ourselves trying to figure things out. We just make the decision. And then we don't like it. And then we want to blame somebody else, Obviously, there's a lot I went off on a tangent. I apologize.
You're good. We're very similar in the way that we think about a lot of this stuff. The other part of what you were saying is, that narrative that we have that's running in the background of our minds. There's things that happen to us when we're younger, and we only have a particular type of language to make meaning of those experiences. And then they stick with us, and you become a young adult, and you're still running that script in the background, and it's never been updated with the new adult language that you have today to be able to look at that and say, actually, this is what happened. This is the language that fits that, and prescribe a new meaning to that experience that allows you to then, shift away from that and move in another direction. And we're not trying to bypass or do any of that. We're just saying that, yeah, that happened. But at some point in my life, I have to recognize that I can move forward from these things, and it's actually mandatory for me to do that. But all too often, and I did this, you find yourself sitting in this place of just ruminating on a particular story, and that's your narrative. You don't challenge it. You're stuck in it. You don't know how to get rid of it. It feels completely defeating, feels that it's going to last forever, and you don't know that it doesn't have to, because nobody ever told you.
Well, yeah, and this behavior that we're talking about, this like changing, wasn't modeled, right? I feel like,
Right.
And that's not, I'm not like trying to trash talk anyone's parents or family, but even mine, like a lot of my family, because we came from very poor circumstances, was just about survival. And in the therapy space, and this is not the end all be all, but there's like this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I like to refer to it because when we're in survival mode, like self-actualization, which is like the very tippy top of your pyramid, you can't get there. And it's not important, right? We need food, we need shelter, we need clothing, we need clean air and water, stuff like that. And I only bring that up to give a little bit of compassion for like past versions of ourselves, past generations who were just trying to survive. And I think that's why, as we get older, or I don't know if this is true for you, but it definitely is for me, that like when you get out of your upbringing, your like basic circumstance, things you had no choice over, then that's why I was like, my 20s were crazy. I think it's because I was like, who am I now? It's almost like you're this amorphous blob and you're trying to figure out like, what do I want based on this past story? What are the things I still agree with and don't? And it's a lot of like, I call it like my shapeshifter era, because I'm like, I'm going to try this on. Do I like this? Maybe I could be this person. And for better, for worse, and some of it is still tied to those old stories. Thank God I was in therapy like so much. My dad was dying at the time. And so I was in therapy like twice a week and in a grief group and doing all this stuff, because that allowed me to notice old stories I was telling myself. I think it was around that time I realized people pleasing wasn't really about me being a good person or caring about others. It was about my discomfort with conflict. And I was like, my whole world explodes. But there are these periods in our life, and continually, I'll be honest, I'm still shape-shifting. I'm still trying to figure it out a little bit. But, realizing what those old stories are is really powerful, because once you realize what they are, then, or at least for me, then I felt able to start to change it. It's almost like if it's just running in the background, almost like a cassette tape going just in the back of my brain, just going and going and going, and I'm not paying attention to it, then I can't turn it off. I can't hit stop. But once I know it's running, I'm like, hey, I don't think I really agree with this, or, I don't know if that's fully true. Then I can pause it. Then I can stop it. Then I can maybe change the music and mix it up, Yeah. And that's been honestly, in the last like 3 years of my life, I've really worked to change some other, because there's tons of these stories, by the way. Unfortunately, it's like you got a big one of those huge things we used to have in our cars in the back in the day, where you have like 6 disc changers in the trunk. Like it's like that, and you have endless stories that are weaving through your brain. And in the last few years, I've really tried to untangle those, and I've
And
done a
then all
lot
the
of it.
CDs fall out all over the back seat, and you're like,
Your big,
no.
your big Bible, your big book of CDs. Oh my God, somebody steals that. Your whole life, yeah, right? Oh my God. But anyway, long story short, I've been doing a lot of journaling to recognize what those old stories are that are still playing that I've kind of haven't been able to tap into yet. And not to sound super dramatic, but it's been incredibly life-changing to realize that I don't have to think about money that way. I don't have to approach conflict this way. I don't have to react to this. And it's just, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't sat in the quiet with myself, if I hadn't paid more attention, if I hadn't considered who I want to be tomorrow and what am I working towards, you know?
I don't think people consider the power of journaling enough. It seems so stupid. It's so easy. And I think because it's so easy, you're like, I'm not going to do it. But
Totally.
yeah, so I started with Ryan Holiday and the Daily Stoic with my journaling, and because I didn't know how. I was one of those people, if I'm going to journal, it's got to be perfect. I got to figure out how to do it right. So you get online and you look, what is the proper way to journal? And of course, there wasn't much out there, but you do find journaling for men, and there's a whole like article written on it in Men's Health or something. But I ended up coming across that, and so I utilized the Stoics, where you read something from the Stoic and then something from Ryan Holiday, and then there's journal prompts in the journal portion of that. It gives you that opportunity and the time to sit with yourself and like, well, what do I think about that? So now you're thinking about that. What does that actually mean? Well, I've never done this before. What is metacognition? This is so weird. What's happening? I did that for 2 years, and you start to gain command over your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and you start to understand yourself so much more, that when somebody presents you with something that, oh, well, you're an asshole or you're this, you're like, am I though? Maybe I'm being an asshole right now, or maybe you're triggered, emotionally activated by a circumstance or challenge that's going on in your own life, and you're taking it out on me in this moment, and I actually don't have to accept that. Whereas in the
Yes.
past, it was just like, I'm a piece of shit, apparently.
And you accept it as fact, and then you go on with that story potentially, right? It's such
Forever and ever.
It's such a disempowered place to be. That's what I always try to tell people, is like, I always want to take my power back. And you're right, like journaling, the way it's funny, like figuring out how to journal. So I kept diaries when I was younger. Maybe it's like a girl thing, but I used to do, dear diary, today, you know, I did nothing essentially. It's like I kept them when I was little. I'd be like, I went to grandma's house and we made cake. But I still to this day journal, but instead of it being like dear diary, I start off with gratitude, and not in the like, I'm thankful for a roof over my head. That could be one day, but every day I challenge myself to come up with something new, to notice all the things that went well, because our brain looks for threats more than it does for things that aren't threatening, because that keeps us safe. And so I force myself to try to consider what's going well. And then this wild thing, my journal is from The Artist's Way, the morning pages. I don't know if you've done The Artist's Way. Love it. But anyway, after going through gratitude, just briefly, then I spend some time talking about this life that I want to have and how excited I am about it, that it's coming to fruition. And this sounds so, maybe like, Katie, you're delusional. This is weird. But to force my brain into a space of excitement and things that I'm wanting to create and I'm looking forward to, acting as if it's happened to me has changed. I feel like at a cellular level has changed me, because when people present me with something negative, like if my husband, for instance, like, well, I don't really know how we're going to afford that. I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. Like, I don't even entertain that. I'm like, that's not the right question. The question is, what are we going to do with it when we get it? Because it's happening and you just have to jump on board. Like, you're creating your reality through your thoughts. So do you want to be poor, or do you want to figure this out? You know? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you realize if you think a certain way, you're going to look for things to confirm that. I know I'm getting on a whole nother tangent of like psychology.
Yep.
But it's like, I want people to know it's life changing, and I didn't even know I was doing it. So I'm a therapist. I read a lot of books. I try to educate myself to my best of my ability. Did not realize the impact this would have. I did it more out of the fact that I was in a dark place and I needed to pull myself out. And so if anybody out there is feeling like, oh, I just can't get better and like, oh, it's so hard, like just start telling yourself the story of what it would be like and how good things can be and the things you're looking forward to, and start putting that together. And when I tell you that it gets to the point, honestly, after 6 months probably for me, where I can't even entertain negative thoughts. Like you said, like I feel like that's why I said cellularly, I feel like I'm a different person. And like you said, like my brain doesn't even, am I an asshole? No, I don't accept that. Like I'm just different in the way I process information about my world and about my expectations of self and others, that like if it doesn't serve me, I know it right away and I'm able to be like, no, and I just move on. Like it's such a, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's just been such a surprising benefit to journaling when it's simple. Like you said, it's not there's nothing, you don't even need anything fancy. Like you just need a pencil and paper. And I just jot that stuff down, and it's, yeah, I can't even describe to you how life-changing it is. Even just the other night, I went to this event, and normally I'd be so concerned about like, did they like me? Was I friendly enough? Like, did this person accept, I'm trying to like make friends, and because I moved to a new area and like, I don't really have my people yet. And I would be so concerned, but I honestly didn't give two shits. Like I was standing around and these people weren't my people. Like I knew right away, and this is no judgment of them. It's just like, this is not going to be a good fit for me. And they started talking about something else, and they purposely like excluded me. Like one girl like moved in front of me, and I just didn't care. I just stood there, and I was so unaffected. And I didn't even realize it till I got home. And my husband was like, well, how was it? And I was like, oh, well, some people are kind of mean, but like these other people are really cool. And like, this is really interesting. And I met this person. And then later I was like, wow, I wasn't even impacted by that. Because guess what? You don't have to be. Like all of that is a choice. And I just don't think I realized it. I knew it, but I don't think I felt it,
I love all of that. Ask and know that it is done, I think, is one of the more difficult things, especially reading through the Bible, and using that as a journal as well is another thing that I've done for the past year and a half. So reading different scripture and then spending time with a notepad as I'm reading all the things that are coming to me, and just jotting all of that down. I have notebooks full at this point that are just waiting to be developed into content, but I just haven't figured out how to speak on that topic in that way, but I'll get there. And then the other thing you said is incompatibility. You don't have, so if somebody is rejecting you and it's actively happening in front of you, or you're in a dating, you're in a situationship, it's okay to recognize that there's just an incompatibility here, and it has nothing to do with your self-worth. It has nothing to say about you as a person. It's just this person doesn't have the capacity to be in a relationship with you based off of whatever it is, your goals, your dreams, your hopes, your desires, wishes, and prayers, your values and standards. Like you should be holding to those things and hold those things close to your heart and evaluating those relationships through that lens. And that way, when somebody says you're too much for me, or nobody's ever going to be in a relationship with you, it's like, no, that person cannot be in a relationship with you. And it's just an incompatibility. So start rephrasing that, and you're going to take your power back really quickly from the dating scene.
100%. And reframing is so powerful. I love, I said, like the rephrasing of it. Like sometimes we take something in as it's said and accept it as fact. And I'm like, no. Like you said, it's not that no one's going to date you. It's that person's not going to. And guess what? That's not a good recipe, right? You're not compatible. It doesn't work. And that's not bad. Like I always try to ask myself, and this had, moderately worked for me, so I'm just throwing it out, is that sometimes when you meet new people and they don't like you, I'm like, instead of being offended if they don't like you, do I like them? Like, we don't consider that. Like, do I like everybody and get along with everybody? Absolutely not. That's not what's expected of us. But unfortunately, we expect the reverse. We expect everybody to like us, or we want that to happen. And we can try to chameleon ourselves into 1,000 different people to try to please them, when in fact I don't know, like it was weird for me to not be affected by that person, like clearly not being interested in me at all, but it felt so good. I don't know, it was, because I didn't like her either. Like, if and that's not a put down. It's just, we're just different people. We have different, I could tell you from the get, our values are very different. And so I was like, that's something that journaling's helped me with too, is figuring out what I value and making sure the relationships that I spend time with align with that. And the energy I'm putting into things is aligned with my values. We don't talk enough about values.
Do you have time to go through COVID real quick?
Yes, of course. Always. Yes.
Okay. So One of the most common statements is, I can't believe it's 2026. How has it been, 6 years and some change since that moment in time? It feels like 3. How am I all of a sudden 47 years old? Oh my God. And it's like, I'm struggling with this too, because when you think back, you're like, where did the time, did the Hadron Collider cause a space rift? And, what happened here that caused all that time to just slip away from us?
And this is, I'm making broad strokes here, but trauma and dissociation. And I say
Fair.
that laughing because I experienced it too, and I think the first thing is that people put trauma on this huge pedestal, or they have this belief about what it has to be. Like, in order to be traumatized, I must have gone to war, or I must have been abused as a kid. And yes, those are traumas as well. However, trauma essentially means that I feared for my life and safety, or the life and safety of someone else close to me, period. That's what it means to be traumatized. Now, not all trauma turns into PTSD. In order for it to be post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, it has to be more than our brain and body are able to process. And I don't know about you, but COVID was a lot to process. I had no reference point. It was terrifying. I was like Clorox wiping my food. I was afraid to talk to people, and I didn't go home for Christmas. Like, shit was crazy. Like, we just have to admit, and we had like no information, and we also had an election. It was just, things were
Well, shamefully, my degree is in threat and response management, which covers
yes,
pandemics. And I was so taken by the initial experience and this being deployed, because I was in the middle of getting my master's degree. So we're already talking about this.
how fortuitous.
We have medical staff that are in the program with us. It's a mix of police officers and medical staff that would take this type of degree. And so we're having these conversations and going over this stuff. And it's like, plus, I'm a police officer at the time, so I'm out in the public going through all these different experiences and still having to report into different crime scenes and things that are happening. So you're taking in all of this stuff all the time. I still had the belief that, yes, the government is here to help. It's like they did us dirty on that one, and they know it. And unfortunately, I find myself in that place of being mad at myself over the whole thing. I wish I would have looked at things a little bit differently, hindsight being 2020. And of course, I've let it go because, life moves forward. It continues to go on, but you still find yourself in that place looking back like, man, I wish I would have handled things just a little bit differently.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you have to give yourself a little bit of compassion, because we've never been through anything like that. And I'll speak personally, reading about something, learning about something, and doing it, very different. Even as a therapist, it's like I can read about attachment, but when you see it playing out, it's different. It's not exactly as what we thought, right? And so COVID was traumatic for everybody, all people. I think, we didn't even have anything in place. It felt very chaotic. And I personally believe that the time feels lost or like jumbled, because when you're under intense stress, one of our like freeze responses is dissociation. And people don't talk enough about it, but they estimate, and I think it's higher than this, but they say 50% of all adults have at least experienced dissociation once in their life. And I can tell you, there's been many times actually, but there's one in particular. I remember I was at this like music festival, and a person who's not my friend anymore was like having a meltdown and like was so angry and like shouting at people. And I just got overwhelmed, and I legitimately can't tell you much more than that. I'm like, "Bleh." I was just like,
Yeah.
I got to go, it was just.
I'm way back here now.
Yes,
I can see what's happening, but I'm way back here now.
Yep, I retreated, pull out, right? And I think in general, COVID was overwhelming for everybody. It was scary if you had kids, if you had elderly parents, if you had any kind of pre-existing condition. There were so many things that we were scared about that it's too much. And I think our brain just pulled the ripcord on reality a little bit, took us out. And the common symptom of dissociation is what's called a dissociative fugue, which is like, I don't remember. And I think that's why our memories are kind of splotchy. And we're like, oh my God, it's 2026. What happened? I feel like we haven't really a lot of us haven't given ourselves an opportunity to process what happened, so that we can like, and I don't mean like tap back in, but for lack of a better term, come back down, like get out of stress response, because I think we've kind of gotten so used to being in it. It's almost like we're in a war-torn nation that's still in war, and we're just like going along, doing our thing, letting our nervous system get hijacked by social media 24/7, and we haven't really calmed down to like pre-COVID feels like we,
Yeah, and
you
we're not
know,
going to either. That's the problem.
I know.
Whatever we had prior to 2019 is never going to exist again. So that, that felt safe. It was normal. It was the past 50 years of the way the world operated, and there were things that were expected, and we knew what the news cycle was generally going to look like and the challenges that we were going to face, and, the things that are going on in society. And then we had this massive shift in 2020 that started, the great divide and separation of all people in a lot of different ways. And then we had the rise of the influencer therapist. And I'm not blaming them. Like, I get where it comes from, but, they love to talk about just get rid of your family, separate from them. And it's like, maybe. Or do we need to stretch our capacity to be able to hold space for people that have different ideas, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and inner worlds and came from a different time period or whatever it is? Do
Yeah.
you have the ability to put yourself in their time period, in whatever? It's so interesting to me that people seem to lack the ability to do this, to actually look at the world in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and say, okay, this is what was going on. This is what was happening. This is what the family looked like. This is what was going on with individuals. This is what, general society looked like. This is what was happening in Chicago and New York and DC in that time period. These were the challenges that the world was facing. And then you can kind of understand, I get why you would think like that. I
Yeah,
get
that's
it.
where my parents, their stories came from, right? We're talking
Yes.
about our stories. What about their stories? And yeah, and expanding your capacity, man. I wish I had like a magic wand and I could all of a sudden give everybody an expanded capacity.
Please.
I'm like, maybe I'll start journaling about that. We'll make that one come true.
I would love for you to manifest that. It would make relationships so much easier.
So much easier because it's not, I feel like growth never comes out of comfort, right? Things in my life that I'm grateful for when I look back are never the easy times. I can be thankful and grateful for them, but it's not, we need to have a little bit more of that like friction, a little bit more of that discourse, and know that that doesn't mean the relationship is over, that doesn't mean things can't get better, that's like part of growth as humans is like challenging your thoughts and having other people share theirs, able to sit with each other, even if you agree to disagree. I can't come to any shared space with you on this, but we're both humans. We both, I heard this one phrase that always sticks with me, and it was about Democrat versus Republican. So it was like talking about the two sides. And this was I forget the woman's name, I think Heather, but anyway, she was like, we all have the same goals. We want to live in a safe space. We want family. We have the same goals in our lives, but we have different ways of getting there. And she said, we have to remember, we have the same goal. We're going to the same destination. We're just on different roads. And I was like, such a beautiful way to put it, because people want to other people. You think this way, you're this, and like name them and then like cast them out as if it's bad. And I'm like, no, and this is me being from California for too long. You're on the 10 and I'm on the 101. But we're both headed to Big Bear or whatever, we're both headed to Mammoth. We're headed out. And you just have to remember we're all, we're doing our best. It's all our first rodeos, and you have to offer compassion to people, even if you don't agree with them.
All our first rodeo. That is so true. I had another point I wanted to say on that one. I don't think it's going to come back to me, unfortunately.
Don't you hate that when it like flies away? I try to take notes, but it's hard to keep it all.
That's just my brain. It's how it works, unfortunately.
Mine too.
What we were saying, go in different directions on the same path. The difference between right and left. We want the same things.
But we have different ways of getting there.
We all think we're the good guy.
Yes.
In the story. And it doesn't matter if you're right or left. Everybody thinks they're the good guy, and everybody thinks they have the right way to go about it. This is the direction we should be heading. And when you recognize there is no right and left, there's just us and them, then your world becomes very different. You see things very differently. So 100%. I would encourage people to try to get to that place, because if you can get there, man, God love you.
Yeah, right? It's different. It feels different.
It feels like authority. It feels like I've taken back something that was taken away from me. It feels like complete autonomy. It feels like emotional freedom. It feels like, you actually can't put power over me with your words or your statements or your issues, your problems, your concerns, your challenges, your beliefs, your systems. And not saying I live completely outside of that. I'm not like, million acres somewhere in the woods somewhere, with solar panels and stuff, but I would do it if I could.
Off the grid. Yep. I'll introduce you to that part of my family,
Might be awesome. No. So do you think we left people hanging here on any particular topic? Is there anything that we need to shore up for them?
I think just to put like a pin in it, I think for anybody out there who's feeling a little lost or feeling a little disconnected, start with yourself. It's so easy to think like, oh, I need to make this change or I need to do this or I need to start doing all these things and like actions. The one action I would just encourage you to take is spend 5 minutes journaling. Just grab a piece of paper. And if you don't want anybody reading it, shred it when you're done. It doesn't need to be reread back. It doesn't need to make sense. Your journal can be all over the place. It doesn't need to be spelled correctly. It doesn't need to be perfect, but just start getting to know yourself again. I feel like that's something that I've known for a long time, but I lost the practice of it, and it has been life-changing.
Do you have any promotions or things that you got going right now? Any courses?
Yeah, my new book, Why Do I Keep Doing This, is available now. It came out December 9th of last year. I'm really proud of it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's
That's
probably
awesome.
my most personal book. And it's kind of a lot of what we talked about. It's all about the illusion of control in our life and how the ways that it's shown up for me, whether that's perfectionism, people pleasing, shrinking myself to fit places I don't belong, all that. It's available wherever books are sold. And just then find me on social media, Katie Morton, KATIMORTO on MORTON on YouTube, Instagram, and I have a podcast, Ask Katie Anything as well.
And of course, all of this will be linked down in the show notes, guys. So make sure that you connect with Katie and get her book. Katie, thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun for me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, my pleasure.